What we're talking about is fraud on such a massive scale that it probably costs you at a minimum $2,700 a year. You personally, if you're an American taxpayer. We've been hearing a lot about the craziness of the SNAP program and the EBT card program and TANF and all those different programs where you have these uber entitled, highly obese people saying that they're starving to death because they can't get their $4,000 a month from the U.S. taxpayer to buy ding dongs and Little Debbie's cakes. Well, I'm going to show you that it goes much deeper than that. It's not just the fact that we have people who really are not that poor, who refuse to work, who see it as their entitlement to live off the backs of tax-paying Americans. It goes much deeper than that. There is an intentional, organized criminal syndicate, or actually many of them, that are stealing money from Americans day in and day out. And I'm going to point out some of the most egregious examples today. It's going to blow your mind. So please do me a favor and hit like on this podcast and make sure you're subscribed. Go share it with your friends if you have other social media platforms, because this is something that people need to hear about. And I'm going to show you how Americans in this way are literally funding terror around the globe. There's one welfare program that's called the Federal Child Nutrition Program. It's run by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And the idea behind it is it's supposed to feed low-income kids, especially if the schools close or something like that. And restaurants can apply to become a part of this program. They're supposed to serve meals on site to needy children. The sites are supposed to be inspected. The claims are supposed to be verified. But about the time that Joe Biden took office, they stopped inspecting. They allowed unlimited claims. The Biden administration let restaurants self-report the numbers of people that they were serving. And what this did is it created about a $250 million loophole worth of fraud. $250 million in one case that's been found. There's an organization in Minnesota called Feeding Our Future. Feeding Our Future is a small Minnesota nonprofit. It was started back in 2018. Before 2020, they served a few daycares, just a few daycares. They got $3.4 million from the federal government. That was under the first Trump administration. After Joe Biden took office, the numbers exploded. And Feeding Our Future went from $3.4 million a year to more than $200 million a year by sponsoring more than 300 fake meal sites around Minnesota. Now, the one that's at the center of this conflict, or this case, is a Somali restaurant. And it's a restaurant where, now get this, this probably will not surprise you one bit. Representative Ilhan Omar, the Somali immigrant who serves as a Congress critter for that district in Minneapolis, St. Paul, she went to this one restaurant, Somali restaurant, and made a whole video about how, you know, this restaurant's doing such great things. They're serving all these kids. And it showed her like carrying some tins of food into the restaurant, and like she was serving all these kids. The only thing you don't see in that video, which should have raised some red flags, is a bunch of kids. You see a whole bunch of food laid out on tables. and you don't see any children at all in the video. All you see are the workers that are putting the food together. Well, as it turns out, this particular Somali restaurant, this one out of 300 plus sites that Feeding Our Future was defrauding Americans through, this one site claimed to be feeding more than 6,000 children every day. However, they weren't feeding more than 6,000 children every day. The FBI got a little suspicious. So what they did is they went outside this restaurant and set up cameras on telephone poles and stuff and started recording the number of people who visited that site every day. And after a 6-week investigation, the FBI said that the average number of people who walked in the doors of that restaurant were about 40. There were about 40 people a day walking into that restaurant. Probably half of those people were employees of the restaurant. So they weren't feeding anybody. It was ghost children that were being fed by this program. And they have now been cracking down on these people. They've now arrested 75 people. Here's the 75th defendant. This is from the United States Attorney's Office of District of Minnesota. 75th defendant charged in Feeding Our Future fraud scheme. And it lays out how many people they have arrested for this one scheme. All right, so here's how this scheme worked in Minnesota. First of all, Feeding Our Future created fake meal sites, empty stores, apartments, parking lots. One site claimed to feed 5,000 kids a day, but it didn't have a kitchen. There was no kitchen. And they said they fed 5,000 kids a day. Then they submit fake claims. They say they served millions of meals. One group claimed 18 million meals that they served in one summer. That's not even physically possible. Then the USDA just sends them a check. They get between $4 and $13 per meal. Feeding Our Future knew about it. They got the money from the federal government. They took a kickback of about 15% and gave the rest of the money in cash to these sites. Well, the vast majority of these 300 sites were run by Somalis. The Somalis would then take that cash, smuggle it out of the United States, and take it to Somalia. Now, there are allegations in these affidavits that are coming out now that show that some of the people that were running these sites bought Lamborghinis, bought beach houses, took expensive vacations, wired cash to their families in Africa. One man built a resort in Africa with stolen funds from U.S. taxpayers. No kids were fed. It was all fake. And now they're getting caught. Total amount of money stolen, more than $250 million. 75 plus people charged. At least 56 of those people have pled guilty or been convicted. They've been able to recover maybe about 50 million of that by confiscating cars, homes, bank accounts, things like that. This is a tiny fraction of the fraud that's taking place. And so much of this is tied up with the Somali community in Minnesota. There are more than 60,000 Somali migrants in Minnesota. Many of them, probably more than half of them, are here illegally. They're illegally in the United States. And they were taking part in these schemes. Here is what the the federal government is now doing. They're tracking down these cases, and listen to the laundry list of things that they have found. This will make your blood boil, folks. What you're about to hear, if it doesn't make your blood boil, you're not American. You must live somewhere else, maybe in Somalia. Take a listen.
Since September 19th, officers from our fraud...
Did you hear what he said? Just since September of this year. Okay? Keep that in mind.
Detection and National Security Directorate, working in teams, have conducted over 1,000 site visits across the Minneapolis-St. Paul area as part of this operation. What they found should shock all of America. Focusing on a list of over 1,000 target cases involving more than 900 individuals, our officers encountered blatant marriage fraud, visa overstays, people claiming to work at businesses that can't be found, forged documents, abuse of the H-1B visa system, abuse of the F-1 visas, and many other discrepancies. Over the course of the operation, our officers found indication of fraud, non-compliance, or public safety and national security concerns in nearly a little less than 50% of the cases interviewed. We found troubling patterns with the Uniting for Ukraine program that should have raised serious concerns under other administrations, such as an individual filing to sponsor more than 100 aliens, and organizations sponsoring hundreds. We are continuing to investigate these cases. Some of the other troubling cases that our officers found. In one case, officers identified an alien who had overstayed his visa waiver, who was the son of a known or suspected terrorist on the no-fly list. He had previously been found to have engaged in marriage fraud, which resulted in the denial of several immigration benefit requests. He was arrested and is now presently being returned to his country of origin. In another, an individual admitted to obtaining a fake death certificate in Kenya for just $100 to prove he was no longer married. In reality, his wife is alive, living here in Minneapolis, and is the mother of 5 of his children. And incidentally, he has another wife living in Sweden with whom he has an additional 3 children. In another case, an alien entered the United States without inspection in 2023, was released by Border Patrol. The alien married a U.S. citizen while in removal proceedings and was interviewed at the Minneapolis-St. Paul USCIS field office just last week, where both he and his American spouse stated under oath that their marriage was legitimate. The USCIS officers conducting the interview were suspicious. The site visits were authorized the same day. The American spouse ultimately that afternoon admitted the marriage was fraudulent and entered into solely for immigration purposes and withdrew her petition for that alien. This type of same-day action for interview, from interview to site visit, has really never happened before. And finally, I wanted to note, in one case, an alien engaged in marriage fraud by taking advantage of an elderly U.S. citizen spouse, including threats and severe neglect. The American spouse was able to divorce the alien with the help of her family and caregivers, but the family still lives in fear of retaliation.
This is just since September. They found more than 900 people, almost all of them Somalis, over 1,000 different cases of fraud, spanning all sorts of government programs, not just the feeding the kids programs, not just the program defrauding Medicaid, but there. And here's another one that was I talked about several times: Child Care Assistance Program, CCAP, across Minneapolis, especially in the Somali areas. There was a massive scam, massive losses for that one scheme could approach more than $100 million a year. Now, all of this, again, vast numbers of Somali migrants are involved in these schemes. This was not just a few bad apples that put these schemes together. These schemes required the participation of thousands of Somalis, because with the child care scheme, they would identify that the kids existed. You know, they had to register the kids. And so they were literally going around to Somalis all across Minneapolis and St. Paul and saying, okay, you got 3 kids, sign these papers. We're going to put them in daycare. You don't have to send them to daycare or anything. Don't worry. We'll give you a kickback on that. You can make a little money by putting your kid in daycare. Wink, wink, nod, nod. So it required the participation of thousands of Somalis, at least half of which are migrants. At the same time, according to this Newsmax report, 42.4% of Somali immigrants in America are accepting food stamps. The problem is, you bring somebody from an uncivilized country that's a failed state, where there's no law, there's no rule of law. You bring them to a place where they came from earning less than $1 a day wherever they lived in Somalia, and you bring them to the United States where you can get $4,000 a month if you have enough kids from the federal government. It is winning the lottery every day at the expense of the U.S. taxpayer.